Everyone has probably seen Coraline at least once in their lives, but there are certain details you probably never noticed. You see, Coraline shows us the harsh reality that an addict person lives in. You didn't notice, did you? So let's dive straight into this explanation. Let's start by saying that Coraline is about a teenage girl whose parents don't pay even the slightest bit of attention to her. Coraline does everything she can to get her parents' attention, but she can't even impress them by telling them that she almost died. Wow! What kind of parents don't care if their daughter dies? But anyway, to escape from all this, she imagines a world where everything she wants becomes a reality, like having better parents, nice neighbors, and everything she wishes she had in her gray reality. But it doesn't end there. If we analyze the details a bit more, we'll realize that what Coraline is trying to tell us is far more terrifying than the other world she found. At the beginning of the movie, we see that Coraline really wants to have a better relationship with her parents, but after several attempts to get their attention, they just get annoyed, and they are more interested in their work. But the important part begins right when Coraline discovers the mysterious secret door. We know she's a teenage girl, and of course she's curious about many things. This door is no exception. She asks her mother about it, but despite this, her mother doesn't resolve all her doubts and instead just gets irritated. But what does this have to do with addictions? Well, my friends, the truth is that this door represents the entrance to the world of those harmful practices that Coraline discovers. And as a teenager whose parents don't pay attention to her, she simply decides to find out herself and solve her doubts. We also need to remember that aside from the indifference we see in her parents, Coraline obviously notices this indifference, and all of this makes her end up hating her reality. And that's why she seeks something to escape her miserable life, and she couldn't find anything better than this mysterious door. She investigates on her own what this door hides, and everything seems very safe. As she progresses, she realizes that it's much better than her own reality. Everything that her boring life lacks is there. Her mother cooks delicious food, her father no longer has a boring job, and something very important, these new parents actually pay attention to her. Coraline is enchanted by this new world, but little does she know that her great dream will soon become her worst nightmare. And that's what happens with all these harmful practices. They seem like the best thing in the world at first, only to destroy your life in the end. After entering the other world for the first time, Coraline receives several warnings from many people. First with Mr. Bobinski, as his mice send her a warning not to go through the secret door, and then her neighbors, Pinky and Miriam, warn her that she's in great danger. But like any teenager, she ignores all this and goes back to the other world. And this immediately reminded me of what happens with all the people who become addicted to something. There are always many warnings, but they don't listen until their life is destroyed. As Coraline continues entering to the other world, she increasingly realizes that it's much better than her reality, as the other mother does everything possible to create everything Coraline desires, making it much harder to leave that world. And in fact, because of this, Coraline gets tired of returning to her reality. After all these wonders, Coraline becomes even more frustrated with her real life, as she tries to tell her parents, but they still don't pay any attention to her. So her mother gets tired of the door and ends up locking it with a key. Coraline also gets fed up with her reality and becomes too anxious knowing that the door is locked. So at the first opportunity, she looks for the key. And what's curious is that before, she used to wait for nightfall to enter the other world. But this time, she couldn't wait any longer and forced her way into the other world immediately. And wow! All of this sounds very similar to the withdrawal syndrome one suffers when trying to quit those bad habits. At this point, Coraline describes how she no longer finds another way out other than that world, making it clear to us that getting out of this world will be incredibly difficult. After she manages to enter her perfect world again, the black cat approaches her, but it's not the other cat. In fact, only one cat exists, and is this one. It warns her that she might be wrong about her perfect world, and it's just a step away from becoming a nightmare. And before we continue, let me explain what this cat represents. If you notice at the beginning of all this, the cat didn't have much interaction with Coraline, but as she delved deeper into the world and began to understand it, the cat accompanied her more and more, representing Coraline's conscience as it gradually helps her see the truth. After the last wonder that the other mother prepares for Coraline, she has to make a very important decision, as it's time to pay the price. The other mother asks her that if she wants to stay, she must let buttons be sewn into her eyes. This part is quite important, because if we think about it, our eyes are what let us see the true reality, and by letting her eyes be sewn shut, Coraline would practically live deceived and blinded by all these practices. It also connects a lot with Coraline's willpower and identity. If she allowed these buttons to be sewn, she would practically be putting her life in the hands of an addiction. We see how Coraline tries to escape from the world she got herself into, and after the proposal to let the buttons be sewn, she's terrified and goes to sleep, hoping that when she wakes up, she'll return to her reality. But surprise! She wakes up and she's still in the other world. And here begins the most dreaded nightmare. Finally, we see how the other mother reveals her true face, showing herself as a monster. She gets so angry with Coraline that she locks her in a dungeon. And it's right here where we can say that Coraline has hit rock bottom. Everything seems lost, but at that moment, she meets the soul of other children who let the buttons be sewn. These children tell Coraline something very important. At first, the other mother was very kind, but everything changed once the buttons were sewn, and little by little, she consumed them. A very good analogy could mean the following. The true face of the other mother could represent the truth behind the dependence that Coraline now has, while the children's comments signify how little by little that world will consume Coraline's life. And these children could symbolize other people who went through the same thing as Coraline, and now they're trying to help her escape that vicious circle. After this, YB helps Coraline get out of that basement and also helps her escape that world. But when she gets back into her real world, she realizes that everything is completely deteriorated, and she doesn't even notice how much time has passed. Her parents are not home, and now she feels very alone. It's then that she decides she has to rescue them, so she goes back to the other world to help her parents. And this is where she starts to take control of her life and faces that horrible reality she created herself. She re-enters the world, and this time the black cat accompanies her even more. She confronts the witch and proposes a game. If she manages to find the eyes of the children and her parents before time runs out, the evil witch will set her free. But if Coraline fails, she'll have to stay in that world forever and have the buttons sewn. Coraline accepts this challenge, and with the help of the cat and the souls of the trapped children, she sets out to first collect the eyes. Thanks to all this help, she finds the eyes in each of the wonders that the other mother prepared. First in the garden, then in the circus of the sisters, and finally in Bobinsky's show. The meaning of this challenge makes a lot of sense with what one experiences when starring Rehabilitation. And in this case, we have the help of friends and family, and of course, one's own willpower. The eyes she has to find represent the experiences, advice, and help that each of these characters gave to Coraline. And of course, her conscience, the cat, knew where to go to for help. the cat continued helping Coraline and was the one who gave her the last eye of the children. And now she only had to find her parents. But the cat, very cunning, knew that even if Coraline fulfilled her part, the witch would not let her leave that world. So now Coraline sets a trap for the other mother, telling her that her parents are on the other side of the secret door. The witch opens the door, and in a desperate attempt, Coraline throws the cat at her eyes, which makes the witch extremely angry, and she now turns into a horrible spider. Coraline, very scared, managed to cross the door and get to the real world. But the other mother's strength is so great that the souls of the children join Coraline to help her close the door. This is very easy to understand, and it clearly tells us that the fight against this type of addiction is too harsh to face alone, and you even need the help of others to move forward. And so, it becomes clear that the souls of the children could simply symbolize other people who went down the same path as Coraline, and now they're trying to help her escape that hell. But although Coraline managed to escape, a part of the other mother's hand was trapped in Coraline's world, and the children warned her that she must get rid of the key completely to be truly free. This hand symbolizes the lingering effects of the residual urges that remain even after one tries to quit an addiction. It represents that last, dangerous part of the habit that can still pull you back if you're not careful. Coraline, with the help of YB, manages to destroy the hand by throwing it into a deep well and sealing it shut, finally putting an end to the other mother's influence in her life. Coraline realizes the value of her real life, even with all its imperfections. She begins to appreciate her parents and her reality even more, understanding that the allure of the other world was just a dangerous illusion. This reflects how people who overcome addictions start to appreciate their true lives and the relationships they have, even if they're not perfect. This interpretation of Coraline shows us that the story is not just a simple children's tale, but rather a complex allegory about addiction, the dangers of escapism, and the importance of facing reality, no matter how difficult it may be. In conclusion, we're not trying to say that Coraline actually carries this message about addiction. It's just one perspective from which we can interpret the movie. And who knows, maybe some of you or someone you know is going through a similar situation, and this perspective might even offer some support or a new way of looking at things. Don't forget to leave us your thoughts in the comments on this video and what other perspectives you find in Coraline.